And that's why I think somebody's going to pay him if the Bruins don't. Like somebody sees the playoff performances, somebody sees the skill and the ability that he has, and somebody's going to give him a lot of money. Dupes, your thoughts on Jake DeBrusk?
Well, you've both convinced me. 5 years at $9 million.
Hey, if you're gonna go 5 years, you're definitely gonna have to pay more per year, right?
Exactly.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. This is, I believe, the 92nd episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. We've got the Boston Globe's Kevin Paul Dupont and the Boston Herald Steve Conroy with us to, kick the Bruins' dead body around a little bit. We'll have an autopsy, go over what happened with this season, where things went wrong in the playoffs, and what the offseason looks like ahead of us. We're recording this podcast the day before we talk to Bruins management and the coaching staff and all that stuff. So I want to get first to our sponsors. Let's thank them. Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players, it could be pros or sharks. You simply pick more than less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. I also want to thank Game Time, our new sponsor. That is gametime.co if you're looking for it on the web, or you can download the Game Time app. It is a place where you can get your NBA playoff tickets, last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, all that kinds of good stuff. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for concerts, sports, comedy, theater, all that. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account. The app is easy to use, and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's get to the business at hand. Kevin Paul Dupont, what did you make of the end of the season, the end of the playoff run, the breakup day, all of the stuff leading up to now? What's your overriding, overwhelming feeling of this season as a whole?
Entertaining season, there's no question, and that's people think it's a winning business, but it's above all an entertainment business. And you know what? From that perspective, it's another good year for them. They filled the joint up. People are excited. Entertaining product, start to finish. Although I felt, I felt it really petered out that in that final round. I think it was a convincing win by Florida. Yeah, we can have a lot of chatter around the the disputed goal, which I still find hard to believe that was ruled not goaltender interference. And yes, the margins are thin, but I think by and large, the better team won in the end. They were touch and go to beat Toronto, and we know Toronto's got its many foibles. So I don't think, contrary to at least a lot of the players, and you never know what they're saying and what they're really thinking, but they think they're really close. They think they're right there. I don't, and I think Sweeney and Neely have a lot of work to do this summer. And I also think a lot of fans think it's just as easy to go out and buy a couple of players, plug them in, and everything is great. It's not that easy, but that's where I am with it. I enjoyed it. I always enjoy it. I don't know if I'd enjoy it as the paying customer to see how it ended.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the free agency stuff, and we'll get to that, it's not, like you're saying, it's not as easy as just you have cash, you have cap space, and you bring in impact players all over the place that are right fits. I mean, just look at David Backes, look at Matt Bolesky, look at some of the big ticket free agency signings that Don Sweeney's had during his time running the Bruins, and those have not always been hits. Like, he's done really good with the smaller money guys and the under the radar signings, and the trades have been good. The signing those guys to extensions. The one place where they haven't always hit is in free agency when they've had a lot of money. So that is going to be a challenge that they're going to face in the off season. But I agree with you. I think they hit their potential. Like, they made a positive step from last year just getting a round win for a lot of the younger guys, for this new core group, this new leadership group, this new group of transitioning from David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, the old guard, to what the new core and the new group is going to be. Getting a playoff series win over Toronto, getting to the second round, losing to a better team, having a good regular season. I think there was a lot of positive steps here. You're right, though. When they played Florida, when they couldn't get the puck out of the zone again, when they couldn't play in the offensive zone, when they were getting dominated for the middle part of that series after the first game, when clearly Florida was rusty and they were still riding the momentum of the Game 7 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, you could see the imbalance in the quality of the team, the depth of the team, all that stuff. They were definitely playing a superior team. And really, Jeremy Swayman was one of the only things that was keeping them alive to Game 6 in that series. So there's definitely work to be done, no question about it. But I don't think there's going to be as big a disappointment, and I don't sense as big a disappointment from the players, frankly, or the fans or anybody as it was last year when they had a loaded team and they lost in the first round of the Florida Panthers. Steve, your overriding thoughts and feelings from the end of the season here.
Yeah, I mean, as a transition year, it was a success. You know, they lost. They not only lost Bergeron and Krejci, they lost Taylor Hall, they lost Nick Foligno, they lost Dmitry Orlov, they lost who else there?
Bertuzzi.
Yeah, I mean, and Hathaway. That's a a big chunk of your team there.
Yep.
And even if they had replaced those guys with all stars from all different teams, there was still no guarantee that they were going to make the playoffs and get 109 points. You never know how it all comes together. And Montgomery had his issues in the playoffs. There are a couple of questionable decisions, but he did a pretty good job by and large of bringing this team together and making it a cohesive unit. And as you guys have said, they got beaten by a better team. They had their chances to make it even a little more competitive. I thought in Game 2 in Florida, they could have been up 3 or 4-0 in the first period, and this would have been a completely different series. They missed on 3 or 4 grade A opportunities, which they did in Game 6, and that was the story. And that's what they have to address in the offseason. They need a bona fide goal scorer to take some pressure off David Pastrnak. And that's not to absolve Pastrnak. He had some great chances that he just didn't bury, and that's what he's paid $11 million to do. But they need another guy, at least one more guy who is a legitimate goal-scoring threat.
Yeah, there's no doubt. They finished averaging 2.38 goals per game in the playoffs. That ranked 12th out of the 16 playoff teams. Yeah. That's just not going to get it done. No. That again underscores how big Jeremy Swayman was in getting them to where they got to, because they were not scoring. It's funny though, like I definitely think they need a scorer. I think you're right. I think they need a wing that can score goals, a sniper, as Dupes would like to say, that we all need around here. They definitely we need one of those. But I think honestly, after watching that series against Florida, and to a degree watching that series against Toronto too, I do, as good as Zacha and Coyle were during the regular season at filling in the vacancies in the top 2 center spots, I still feel like they have a huge need for a number 1 frontline center after watching the playoffs, watching Barkov just absolutely dominate them. Like, just that was a world-class frontline center on a Stanley Cup contending team that was eating the lunch of the other guys. And you need a better center to combat somebody like that if you want to beat a team like that. And I just don't think Coyle and Zacha were good enough. They need to be slotted down, or maybe Zacha needs to be on the wing. They need to figure that out. But I think Coyle needs to be slotted down a little bit. I think you definitely need to go out and try to find a number 1 frontline center. Easier said than done. But I feel like
who is that guy and where is he?
I feel like that is a huge priority and a huge need going forward as well. After watching the face-off struggles, after watching them having a hard time transporting the puck from the D zone to the offensive zone, like the centers play a huge role in all of that stuff. And I think it was very much lacking in the second round of the playoffs, definitely.
Yeah, like, would you like to have a Sasha Barkov on your team? Of course you would, but I don't even think Elias Lindholm is that guy. Never mind, anybody else. He's a good player. Right now, he's a third line center on a team that just got bounced in the second round as well.
But is he better than Zacha and Coyle? I guess that's the question. Like,
Yeah.
would he allow them to kind of slot down into different? Because I think you need to find somebody that is better than them, that can allow them to sort of slot into different spots. That's just, that's what
Well,
I
say. I think if you go get another center, that means you're moving Zacha over to the wing.
Right.
I mean, who knows? Maybe Poitras is in Providence next year. Who knows? But
yep.
I'd like to see what he can do again after a full summer of weight training and all that.
Yep.
So right now they've got 3 centermen. 4 if you want to count Beecher. And so if you get another like a top 6 centerman, that means you shift Zacha over to the wing, I think.
Which is fine. I mean, I think that's something that is definitely doable and they could do. And, they could still have some hybrid thing where, Zacha is playing center, like for defensive responsibilities and, the other guys taking faceoffs and, they seem to play around with that with Beecher a little bit too. And Boquist when they're playing together, just sort of like having them play to their strengths as far as like playing the center position. Dupes, your thoughts just on where they are as far as the biggest needs you saw and the biggest upgrades they need with all of this money that they're going to have in free agency and what you watched during the playoffs and the regular season?
Well, my guiding light here would be they've got to play harder and faster. And under that, the subtext there is, okay, so what makes them play harder and faster? It's got to be a center with more jam. I don't know exactly how what they've got really lines up. If we roll back a year, Coyle was an excellent number 3 center.
Yep.
He showed more than I thought he had. So good on him.
Yes, he did. Absolutely.
Is he number 1 elite center? He's not going to be. So I think he's established himself as a number 2. The number 1 isn't there. Now you start going down. Is Zacha the number 3? You're paying him more to be a number 3. I think Geekie fills that role real well. I like Geekie a lot.
Yep, I do too.
And I would try to develop him as my number 3, and maybe Poitras surprises me. But I still don't have that candidate for up top, drive the line, set the tone, basically be the Marchand in the middle, right? Be the guy who's got the presence, and they clearly lack that. And this isn't, this next part of the topic in my mind isn't necessarily that guy, but it does talk to attitude, which is out of the 13 playoff games, 3 of them we watched, 3 of them start with either 1 shot in the first period, 2 shots in the first period, or 3. That's the bounty.
Yeah,
I mean, absolutely, in my mind, unacceptable. And I asked this in one of the Hanscom things with Sweeney. I said, "Isn't that preparation?" And he immediately went, "Well, we're a low volume team."
I did not like that answer at all.
It doesn't get much more low volume than an average of 2 shots.
We're quality over quantity. I'm like, nobody wants to hear that when it's 3 shots in the first.
Yeah. They were Monty was a little sensitive of that too on game 5 that they won, where they did throw pucks to the net, and it produced something.
Yeah,
and he was a little sensitive, like when I asked him about shots to the net. He said, "Well, it wasn't just shots to the net. We've made smart plays." Okay.
Yeah. And again, I think there's truth in all of it, right? Because that's the beauty of the sport. You can argue it from one end to the other, but they need more shots. They got to get out. They got to come out faster. They got to come out harder. They have to sustain. And again, that's very much the formula of Florida. And now Florida can flame out here in the 3rd round. I don't know, but I think that's the model you have to bring. If you bring this model again, you're going to fail again, because they were too slow to get out. They don't have enough shots. The old adage of traffic to the net, they don't have that. I did notice on their last power play, after going, they finished 1 for 20 over their last 9 games on the power play. They finally had Jake throw it deep to the wall and chase it on one of the early power plays in the last game. You know what? When it's not working, you might not like that method. You got to try something else.
why don't you go and get the Prize Picks app? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. You can get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's upcoming playoffs, during the Stanley Cup playoffs, as well. As I mentioned, you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and anything else today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. It has something for every sports fan, from basketball to hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. How cool is that? You're going to want to get involved right now. David Pastrnak, you can do goals, you can do shots, maybe you can do turnovers because sometimes he has a lot of those in the game as well. You just pick more or less than. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. You mentioned about Steve Montgomery being sort of reticent to credit other things that might be working, as Dupes is talking about. Like when you mentioned, them just going simply low to high in the offensive zone and using the points more, he kind of like poo-pooed that and was just like, that was just one of many things we were doing. I was like, okay, sometimes you just got to play a different style and you can't just hang on to pucks and, wait for the perfect opportunity to present itself. And I think one thing that we've seen with this Boston Bruins team when they're struggling and when they have hard times is that they do hang on to the puck too much and that they're passing too much and that they're not shooting the puck enough. There's got to be some like perfect marriage or the sweet spot to get to where you're shooting a little bit more. I mean, Charlie McAvoy is the guy we always point to, and he passes up shots all the time in spots where he really needs to shoot the puck, but he's not the only one. There's a lot of those Bruins players that have good shooting lanes to the net, could create a rebound, shoot wide, create action around the net, and they just don't do it enough. And that's because I think in part, at least, that's what the coaching staff is preaching to them.
Yeah. And, it's funny, and I'm not absolving this guy of not converting his chances because he missed on a lot of chances this year in tight. But they hire a guy like JVR who's, known for, a dozen years of being a great tip guy, a great guy around the net. And he had some chances, but not, getting pucks to the net more when he's in your lineup is, kind of, odd, I think, especially on the power play.
Right. Yeah. You got, at some point you got to get volume. And I agree with you, Haggs, on the whole topic here about be more shot ready. The big issue with Charlie is he's your $9 million guy. He's the number one every time. He's the number one guy on the power play point, the only guy on the point.
Yeah.
At some point, use my mother's expression, the penny has to drop here, right?
Yeah.
You got to shoot the thing.
Yeah.
And he was doing it right to the end, right to the end, where I would say, oh, here it comes. No, it doesn't. Right back down low. So
and the one game they beat Florida, he had 3 shots on net in the first period. I think he had 6 shots in the game. He was all over it, and he was very aggressive shooting the puck. And they won that game, and they were effective. And to pulling back from a longer perspective, looking at the way this team is going, the trends, all that stuff. Like at some point, Mason Lohrei is going to be running point on that top power play. He is built to be a number one power play quarterback, like shoots the puck, creates offensively, can work with your best offensive players, has the right instincts in the balance of when to do the right thing. Like he just has that offensive mind to flourish in that role. And I think we saw enough from him to think he may even be a full-time guy in Boston next year based on the way he performed in the playoffs. Sure, he's going to need more work in the D zone, and he's never going to be a shutdown D. I don't think you're always going to have to put him with a guy that's a little more of a stay-at-home sort of type. But like, I think Charlie McAvoy is going to have to come to a place where he has the ability to share some of those responsibilities and doesn't feel like he needs to be carrying this full workload of all these different situations and all these responsibilities, because I think we see in the playoffs that trying to do everything kind of wears him down too.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing with Charlie is he's never been a slap shot guy, never been a one-timer guy. And that's a tool that is, really useful on the power play. He gets his points by driving the net, driving around the net, and taking that hard wrist from the high slot. So maybe it will be time for Lori to take over that first power play unit, and he's also a left shot too. So that it's never quite been the same since Krug left, I think.
Yep.
So maybe that he fits better with Pasternak for Pasternak's one timer. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, where are we going with this? McAvoy's a terrific player. He's a physical player. He had his problems with the puck, at off and on during the playoffs this year. But I have no big problem that he's a minus player for you. He's a very good player. He's just not what you hope he's going to be. He's not Ray Bourque. He's not a guy who's going to pound 12 shots a night.
As far as the most interesting things from breakup day, Linus Ullmark obviously got a big audience, got a lot of people, a lot of questions, and was ready to answer them all, and it was forthcoming with a decent amount of information. Where do we feel like this? How do we feel like this is going to play out this summer? Do we feel like Linus Ullmark, Dupes is definitely gone and he's going to be traded? How much of a complication is this contractual rights and the no trade provision that he has? And I'm sure the strategic way that he's put teams on there to try to keep it so that he can stay in Boston, because it seems pretty clear he doesn't want to go anywhere and he feels like he's going to be back in Boston next year. But how do you think this ultimately plays out, having seen many situations like this over the years, Dupes?
Well, I'd like them to keep him. I think, but I also think he's the luxury they can't afford at the moment,
right?
Because they're going to have to pay Swayman, and frankly, if I was Swayman, I would be looking at all those deals in Ottawa that are 8 years times $8 million. That would be my mark if I was him.
Yep.
So that said, I
had 7 years and 7, but we're right in the same neighborhood.
Yeah,
it's going to be something like that.
It's somewhere, I think, between $6.5 million and $8 million, right?
Yep.
And then it's on term and how it's structured and all of that. That's how I said. Now that said, I thought last summer they'd try to get him around 3 years at 5. They wanted to play the hardball thing in the arbitration, so that's what they get. And you can argue, that's prudent business or whatever, but I think we all see now he's the guy. And he's young enough that he can handle 55 games. You can bring up Bussy and have him be the backup, and you can move off Ullmark's $5 million. That said, I regret that because it works so well. And the most important thing for them this year was their goaltending. Because of all the stuff we've talked about the guys leaving and the guys coming in and out, plugging in with the $1 million stocking stuffers, all of that, goaltending. So I think he's gone. I don't see that his ding list, if you will, is an impediment. They can trade him to half the teams in the league. I also think that if there's a sticking point here, that it ends up, I use the example of New Jersey. I think New Jersey would love to get him. If he doesn't want to go there, if Tom Fitz says, well, yeah, come here and we'll give you a 5-year extension at 6, 7, then it's a done deal. I believe that. So I don't think that's a big deal. I think he will be gone. Reluctant to see him leave. And it as much as I love Swayman, that's the only kind of next step to find out about him, which is, can he be a 55 if they need him upward of 60? Although it's been a long time since we've seen a Bruins goaltender handle that much work. But if his understudy isn't as good as we think, he may have to do more, and we don't know that. But based on what we've seen, he can handle it.
Yeah, I think after watching him in the playoffs, everybody should feel a lot more confident that he's going to be able to, handle a heavier workload during the regular season and maintain his consistency and performance. And, you never know about health. Anything can happen to anybody, but I think you can extrapolate what he did from these playoffs into the regular season and think maybe he's capable of playing 55 to 60 games. But to your point, you won't know until you actually see it and he maintains performance and is able to, to handle that kind of rigors. Steve, how do you think this whole thing plays out this offseason with Ullmark?
Yeah, I think everybody grabbed onto that quote where he said something to the effect of "My list is my list, and I don't have to apologize for it." And people took it like, he wouldn't waive for certain teams. I think he wants to find the right situation for him. He'd love to stay here, but if he's relegated to being a backup, I don't see how it works out for him. He has one more year left on his deal, and he's not going to increase his value by playing 30 games this year.
Yeah, by wearing a baseball hat on the bench. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really think I'm sure there are some places he doesn't want to go, and he'll stick to that. But I think they will really I think he will be a little more amenable than what people think he's going to be. To waive in certain situations. But yeah, and I think they have to. They have to move him because it's like Kevin said, it's he's a luxury right now they can't afford. Just like when it's time for Torrey Krug to get paid big bucks, he was a luxury they could no longer afford. So Swayman proved himself to be the guy. Again, we'll see if he can play 55 games, and that's pretty much, I think, the cutoff point. I think, when Tim Thomas had his, great years, that's about where he was.
Yep.
So yeah, I think they have to move him. I don't know what they'll get back beyond the cap space for him, just because there's only, so many teams looking for a number one goalie. So they may have to move him basically for the cap space, and maybe a draft pick, but we'll see. But yeah, I think they can and will move him.
Yeah, the returns for goalies in the NHL and trades is always underwhelming. You're not going to get as much for goalies as you think you would. Even a guy that's got a Vezina trophy on his resume, and part of it also depends on how many other goalies are available this offseason. It seems like there's always a few in that sort of carousel that might be available in trades. I agree. It would be nice to have the two of them together for one more year, but once you pay Swayman his 7-8 million, you can't start spending 11, 12, 13 million bucks in salary cap space and goaltending when you have so many other needs on this team that you need to fill. Trading Ullmark would put you around 25 million in salary cap space this offseason, minus whatever you're going to pay Swayman on a new contract. And that's a significant amount of money to either make trades, sign free agents, flexibility to do whatever you need to do to make significant impact improvements to the team. But before we get to that, let's just go through the other UFAs right now that are going to be facing an offseason of uncertainty here, most likely. We'll go one at a time. Just, give me your thoughts on each of them and whether you think they're going to come back. Let's start with Kevin Shattenkirk. Dupes?
He's such a low budget hire. You could, but I just don't see it. I think they'll either go with one of their kids or, by committee. There's just not enough need for him. Didn't use him in the playoffs when maybe that would have helped. Who knows? So no, I don't see Kevin back.
Steve?
Yeah, no, he provided a spark at times when they needed it, on the back end, offensively. But I think they probably need to get a more hard-nosed guy, to compete with Parker Wotherspoon for that, third left shot D.
Yeah, good leadership guy, good power play guy. He
Yeah.
definitely served a really good role this year at a low price tag, no question about it. But I think that's absolutely correct. They'll find, a younger, sort of different player to serve that role next year. Danton Heinen, Steve, I think this is a guy that, played really well, played for Jim Montgomery in college, obviously played with the Bruins before, was versatile, did a lot of things, was banged up in the playoffs, so probably wasn't at his, 100% health and effectiveness in the postseason as he was playing through something. But I think that's a guy that could end up coming back on a low figure, multi-year deal, and could be a guy that could play a lot of different spots in your lineup and be helpful to the team.
Yeah, I like him. I like what he was able to do. I think it depends on what else they can do or what else they think they can do. But he's a valuable guy who can play, you know, fourth line left wing or in a pinch first line right wing.
Yeah,
I mean, those are valuable guys, and I would definitely think about bringing him back, and I wouldn't break the bank to bring him back, but I would consider like give him a second year at least to bring him back.
Dupes.
This is Heinen.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I blipped out there for a second. I definitely have him back. I would go 2 or 3 years with him. I'd go low to mid 2 millions on him. I think he's got a really good shot. I wish he'd use it more. That seems to be a redundant theme here. He's smart enough. Just like Steve said, versatile, can play him up and down. So yeah, I think given his age, given how he fits specifically with Montgomery, all of that, I think he's an easy return versus some of these older guys.
Definitely good value, good two-way player. I also think he's more assertive in some ways offensively than he was the first time around here. A more confident, sort of well-rounded player. So you're getting all of that. And it would have to make sense for him, but I would think he'd be amenable to a team-friendly deal to come back too, since this is a place he's really comfortable with and a coach he's comfortable playing for. So I'd be on board with bringing him back too if the contract was right. James Van Riemsdyk, Dupes, he had his good moments this year. Was obviously part of the bargain basement shopping and free agency.
Yep.
I don't see him coming back. He got into the lineup for the majority of the playoffs, but he did a good job. He got his 1,000th game this year with the Bruins. Had a nice year with them, but I think it's going to be one and out for him.
Yeah, specialty role, and they didn't make much of the specialty. His game petered out, whether that was he did get sick, and then they can't hold that against him. He got sick, had needed time to regenerate, really never got back to where we thought we'd see him. Let's face it, we thought the role he was in, he was going to be maybe a guy who could push 25 goals, 28 goals, get anywhere from 8 to 10 of those on the power play. That just didn't work out. I think given his age, given that what I hope they come out of this with is easier said than done, is a harder, faster team at his age. I don't see that fitting the paradigm.
Yep. Steve.
Great guy. I don't think so. Hey, he had, like I said, he had a lot of opportunities around the net that he just didn't cash in. And, that's what he was brought in for. And, I think they can shore up there.
Agreed. This is an interesting one. Pat Maroon, made indications he'd like to come back to Boston, said he said something along the lines of like, I had the time of my life with this team or something something like that, where he was saying it was the greatest like time of his life, which is hard for me to believe given he's won cups with other teams and done some of the other stuff that he's done. But I like the sentiment of him saying that. Clearly he enjoyed himself and he wants to come back, and he sort of, wants to show what he can do when he's healthy. And I'd be willing to bring him back, especially if it was on like one of those veteran sort of like bargain deal kind of things. Because like players like him don't grow on trees. They need somebody that's tough, that's a presence, that is that sort of big brother type that's in the lineup that's going to make everybody else a little braver and more courageous out there and will scare the other team and intimidate them a little bit. And I think he brings that, even if it wasn't always there in the playoffs. But I think a fully healthy Maroon, I think makes a lot of sense for the Bruins to bring back. Steve?
Yes, I agree. Depending on the price, of course, but yeah. And, obviously, he's not fleet of foot, but if you're playing him on a fourth line with, say, Boquist and Beecher, that mitigates it a little bit. And, he brings a presence, and that's what they were looking for going into this season when they hired Lucic.
Yep.
And, obviously we know what happened there, but, they need that guy. you know, just to, douse any shenanigans that could go on in a game. He'll keep you from getting bullied. It's I think it would be behoove them to bring him back.
Dupes, does he fit into your faster, harder version of the Bruins next year?
He's got the hard stuff. And again, we're rating him off of having back surgery, and we didn't get to see the best of him. There is a lot to like about him. And as you guys are talking, I can be convinced. I'm just not at the moment. I also think, he's going to go somewhere for $1 million. He'll find a team. It may be this one.
Yep.
And if it isn't this one, they can trade for him again come deadline time. Let's face it, he's holding the Lucic chair, right? This was the job that they went out and Milan Lucic, and Lucic, frankly, would have done the job better because he's got more game left. But we all know where that went. So there's that need. What I would like to think is, going back to the whole thing is that they come out of this with a team that's got more compete top to bottom. So you're not relying on this kind of specialty piece to come in and provide that for you. I'd like to see that distributed across 12 other forwards. It's never going to be, right? That's never going to be Pasternak's game. I know we haven't gone to Jake, so we'll go there in a minute, but
yes, he's coming.
Yeah. There's what do we like about him? Let's be frank. We like that he's got testosterone, right?
Yeah.
That he shaves at 8 a.m. He's got to shave again at noon. And they just don't have enough of that in this. And maybe there is a rub off effect there. Maybe having that guy around gets these guys to kind of think that more. I think we see a little of that in just the way he plays in Lorai's game. Lorai comes in saying, you know what, we're here to play. Let's get at it. They got too many guys, and I unfairly typify this as the college game. They got too much college game in them. This is time to get in there and get to the pipes.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think it's probably going to be too much of an undertaking to completely install that into your team, going from one year to the other.
Absolutely.
Like you're not going to have that like top to bottom in the lineup next year. So I do think having somebody that pulls that out of you, or having a few players that pull that out of you is going to be mandatory, is going to be important on the team until you can get to that point. And it's hard to get teams where everybody's sort of on board to do that. Like that's what makes Florida so effective, is they have players top to bottom. Everybody's playing that way. And that's a hard team to beat in the playoffs when they're all playing that way. So I just feel like you might as well be the team that's going to give Maroon the 1 year and $1 million and have him for, from jump at the beginning of next year, have his influence, have his ability and his toughness a factor for the entire season. If you already know what the price tag is going to be and you have the money to spend on it. And I think that's a fair deal for him. So I would think there's interest in bringing him back. I would hope the Bruins are going to bring him back. Derek Forbort, I don't think he's another one that I don't think is going to return among the defensemen. I think they kind of are mostly set. They probably have one defenseman spot where they can bring somebody else in. But they have a lot of guys coming back next year on the back end. And Forbort fought through injuries. Credit him fully for coming back in the playoffs when nobody expected him to play, coming back from the groin surgeries and the thumb surgery. And he did his best. He's obviously a penalty killer and a good stay-at-home defenseman and a big, strong D-man. But Dupes, he's also slow and not very adept at moving the puck. And I think they need to find younger, faster versions of a guy like Forbort, maybe even meaner, because Forbort was a big physical guy, but he didn't have that sort of meanness to him that you really need in your defenseman, that I think the Bruins, frankly, need a little more of. And they started to bring it, like Andrew Peeke definitely qualifies in that category. I think he plays with some mean, and I like that he's going to be on that back end for a while. But Forbort's a guy that I think did really well while he was here, but he's probably not coming back.
No, I don't see him. What I want is a $5 million version of him. So he's a $3 million player as a third pairing defenseman. And again, you have to link money to all this entire discussion because of the cap. So he's a $3 million third pairing defenseman, and he does have assets. There's no question, assets and talent. But I can't afford that at that position. So I think it's covered with Wotherspoon. I think it's
Yep.
covered with Peak, and credit to where it's due here, front office, for identifying those guys. They come in and they play well. So I think they've got enough candidates down there, and frankly, I consider Grzelcyk as one of them, which is another discussion I know. So we'll save that. But
Yep.
what I want is to take that $3 million that they're paying a third pairing defenseman, upgrade it to about $5 million for a top four guy who's not a top four guy in the sense of that he's a big point guy. What I
Right.
want is a top four guy who can plug in with the three other guys, Carlo and the two big boys, and get more out of them by delivering, if you will, kind of lower tier top four talents, which is, I keep getting, this goes way back, so I guess it's irrelevant, but in my mind, kind of like Brad McCrimmon, solid, big enough body, not going to get you points, but can provide kind of a reset in their top four. That's not Forbert. And again, if Forbert wanted to come back for cheap money, that's a different story for a third pairing. But they need a solidifying factor in that top four, in my mind, to make those guys better. Help those guys be better players.
Steve, thoughts on that and Forbort?
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. And I don't know if this guy exists. I would like a guy who could play in the top four, but it wouldn't kill you if Mason Lohrei jumps over him at some point.
Yes.
Yep.
That's what I was going to say, is how does Mason Lohrei factor into this? Because I think he eventually and could very soon project into a top four defenseman. I think he's trending in that direction big time.
Yeah. As far as Forbort goes, I gave him all the credit in the world for coming back when nobody expected him to. I also think it was a questionable decision to kind of force him back into the lineup, shoehorn him into the lineup at that time.
Yep.
But so be it. But yeah, I think it might be time to move on. He's he's a guy who takes a beating, and he's had injuries the past couple of years, and it's just I just don't think his time is here right now.
Yeah, I agree. Hugely popular with his teammates too. They all love him, but he's a very good guy. Like, he deserves props for a lot of the things he does and the way that he played, because it's not a glory role that he plays, blocking shots,
Right.
breaking bones in his hands and thumbs and all the stuff that happens to him when he's blocking shots and taking a beating and, just going out there killing penalties and all the things that he does not play a glory position at the defenseman spot. So he deserves a lot of credit for what he did over the last few years. Another defenseman here, and Dupes just alluded to him, Matt Grzelcyk, didn't play in the second round, had a real rough moment in overtime against Toronto that led to a big goal. Is constantly a guy that, has been really good moving the puck over his career, has had a really good career with the Bruins, is obviously a great story, comes from a great family, local kid. But I think it's gotten to a point where he's exploited too much defensively when he's out there, especially in big moments. And like, the injuries, I think, have caught up to him to the point where he has a hard time playing at the level that he once did as well. So I would feel like a change of scenery might be the best thing for him, and rather than keeping him around in a reduced role where he might not be as happy with it here. I don't know. But Steve, what do you think Matt Grzelcyk in the future holds for him?
Yeah, I agree with all that. He's had a good run here, and like you say, great family. John's, we've all known him for decades.
Yep.
But the model of him playing on the first pairing in the regular season and then getting scratched for the playoffs, it just doesn't work for me. It's I think you're right. He could do with a fresh start somewhere.
I don't care what the fancy stats say about Grizz and McAvoy playing together as a pair in the regular season, Steve.
Yeah, it's just not. It just hasn't worked in the playoffs. So yeah, I would probably let him go.
Dupes?
He's an easy cut because of his money. I think it's 3.7 million thereabouts.
Yeah. Oh, he would definitely, if he was coming back, he would absolutely be taking a big haircut. There's no question.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. Because of who he is and he's a very good team guy.
Yep.
if there's a fit here, it's to look at him as a regular season player and to look at him probably around $1.5 million. And if you're getting into that mix, because the other side of this is, I don't think he's ever going to make more than he just made.
No,
Money. I don't think anybody's going to come out and say, "Come with us, Matt, and we'll give you $5 million a year for the next 3 or 4." I don't think that's going to be the case for him.
yeah,
He's going to find it a kind of a, lack of a better word, a quirky market for him, but he's a quirky fit at this point. I do think, and I wrote this a number of times, it got nowhere, which is one of his assets at BU especially was walking the line and shooting on the power play. They never put him. They did. They gave him very, very short looks in that role. So there may be something more there to him. They don't see it. They've never gone there. I wouldn't expect them to go there at this point, but somebody might think of him as maybe sort of in the Sean Corrali neighborhood of 4 years, 10 million, and say, you know what, we're going to come in. We know you're a good guy. It's going to be a good fit. We'll look at you more as a specialty player. Maybe they'd get something more. But right here, to stay in Boston, I think he's probably $1.5 million player.
yeah, no doubt, and probably looking at a seventh defenseman kind of
Right.
role on the team, which if that's what he wanted to do, maybe there would be a pathway to him coming back, but I just feel like he's probably going to end up getting a better offer, both playing time and money wise, somewhere else, because he can still skate. He can still move the puck if you put him in a regular role. He's always going to have a hard time staying healthy, just given his size, and he's always going to be picked on in the D zone in the playoffs when it gets to that point, because that's just what happens when you have smaller defensemen on your D-men core. And we saw it in Toronto. Like when Toronto saw him on the ice, Ryan Reeves was posting him up in front of the net like every single time. And we saw it in that game-winning goal with Matthew Nyes. John Tavares saw that Grzelcyk was the guy and just put his head down and pulled him to the net, and the puck ends up in front, and they score the game-winning goal. Like that's just what's going to happen. But either way, I think he's going to continue. He's going to find a good landing spot, and he's going to be okay because he's a good player and a good teammate, and he's going to get nothing but glowing recommendations from the Bruins if anybody asks about him. You getting excited about the Boston Celtics? Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, the entire band of Celtics players looking like they have what it takes. Even if Porzingis is hurt every once in a while and has to miss a few games, they look like they're going to put a blowtorch through the Eastern Conference and have a lot of exciting games. If you want to get in on the action, go to Game Time. It's an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. If you need to check out the website, check out gametime.co to see what it's all about. But there is lowest ticket price guarantees, event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantees, job loss assurance, on-time ticket delivery. Game Time Ticket loves their fans, and they're committed to ensuring you have an outstanding experience with them. So why not go and see what Game Time is all about? You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It's easy to find and buy MLB tickets in addition to the NBA playoffs for every kind of event in the arenas. Views from all seats in the venue, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, all of that stuff. Game Time is an app worth checking out. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download it. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time. The last one I saved was the most difficult decision. Jake DeBrusk. He had a great playoff. He led the team in points in the postseason, or he had a good playoff, I should say. I don't know if it was great, but it was definitely good. It was after a regular season where it was kind of inconsistent. He talked about he had a broken hand for about a month or so, maybe a little more than that. He's obviously proven that he can score 20 to 30 goals in the league, has high-end skill, can play in a top six role, maybe would be best served in a third line role on a really deep team. but has the skills in the skating and everything else, and the explosiveness and the game breaking ability to play top six and play with high skilled players. I just think he would have signed and been signed with the Bruins if he was going to be signed with the Bruins and if they wanted him back. I think it's similar to other players where they've ended up just sort of letting them walk in free agency because they know they can't, give the term and give the money that it's going to take to keep that player. I think they got the Bruins probably feel like they've got the best out of Jake DeBrusk at this point, and somebody else is going to overpay for him and realize the inconsistency and some of the, flaws in his game, even though the numbers are pretty good. And, there are parts that the Bruins are not going to be able to replace if they let him walk. They're going to have a hard time. They're going to have to find somebody else that has his skating ability, his finishing ability, his game breaking ability, all that stuff. Steve, where do you think this plays out with Jake DeBrusk?
Where it plays out, how it plays out, I don't know. Like you say, he's not signed by now, and that's a red flag. But
somebody's gonna make him a big offer. Like
absolutely,
probably one of the Canadian markets, maybe Louis' buddies in Edmonton. Somebody's gonna show him a lot of money
because he's a good player.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at that deal that Owen Tippett got, and Tippett's 2 years younger than DeBrusk, and it's $6.2 million for 7 or 8 years, whatever it was, a long-term deal. And he's averaging fewer points a game than Jake DeBrusk. He doesn't kill penalties like Jake DeBrusk. I see a demarcation line in Jake's career from the time it became public that he made a trade request. For some reason, at that point, he became a much better player. He became a more complete player. He's no longer that guy who's, if he's not scoring goals for you, he's doing nothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
He's got speed, he's got length, he covers ice. So yeah, I would sign him. In part of that equation is if you don't sign him, you don't have to sign one impact player up front. You have to sign two impact players up front.
Right.
And I'm not sure that they can do that.
Yeah, it would be hard if I were the Bruins. I would have to think long and hard about going like 7 or 8 years, upwards of $6 million for DeBrusk. But the other side of that coin, as you're talking about, is if you're not going to give it to him, who are you going to end up giving it to?
Yeah.
Sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, especially where I agree with you. I think the last couple of years, he's been a more effective, more complete player, more competitive, goes harder to the net, like will actually finish off some checks when he's trying to fight for the puck on the forecheck, kills penalties, has even blocked some shots, like doing some things now that maybe you didn't see earlier on in his career. He's got a little bit more of a harder edge to his game in addition to the skill game that he has. And he's played through injuries at points too, like when you talked about playing through the broken hand this season. But still, I think you got to think a little bit about that kind of investment for that kind of term and that kind of money.
Another part of the equation on him.
Yeah.
He shows up in the playoffs usually.
Well, that's
he's not afraid of the big moment.
Yep. And he showed it again this year, like led them in points. It wasn't David Pastrnak that led the Bruins in points in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It wasn't some of your other big money players. It was Jake DeBrusk. And that's why I think somebody's going to pay him if the Bruins don't. Like somebody sees the playoff performances, somebody sees the skill and the ability that he has, and somebody's going to give him a lot of money. Dupes, your thoughts on Jake DeBrusk?
Well, you've both convinced me. 5 years at $9 million.
Hey, if you're gonna go 5 years, you're definitely gonna have to pay more per year, right?
Exactly. No, I had to give you an answer you didn't expect. My answer is, I would give him 2 more years at $4.5 million. That's where I would go with him. Which is what he got, right? I think this last deal was 2 years times $4 million.
Yeah.
Then he would be a Utah Coyote.
Exactly.
Well, there you go. Yeah, exactly right. And the only you guys have brought up great points about him and his game. What I never see from Jake, two things I never see from him are, sort of the Carter Verhaeghe element of guy who's just going to be out there hard and nasty and getting it done. That'll never be Jake. So we're always looking at these guys through what they aren't. At least I am, and and that's just the fact of life. He's not going to be that guy. He's also not going to be, which is where I think he doesn't get his money. He's not going to be that guy who really enhances the line. Now, typically you want that from the center, and that's the role. But when you get to point of paying guys $6 and $7 million, you really want them to be not every night, but the guy who can be that. I don't ever see that in Jake. What he's got? He's got great legs. He's got great sense of when to dart in and out. And so for me, the money he's making today is where I would keep him, and I think the market will take him elsewhere. So you got to use his $4 million probably into kind of what I was suggesting with Forbert, to go to a $7 million guy that you have the faith that he is going to play or build into that harder, faster game. You're not going to get faster than Jake, but you can get harder, and I think that's what they've got to do.
Yeah, and like that's why I mentioned, like, if you're sure that you're going to move on from Jake DeBrusk and you're not willing to invest the term in the AAV that some other teams definitely will if he hits July 1, you better make sure you have somebody you're going to bring in, or plans of a couple of guys you want to bring in that you think are upgrades to a harder version. Or, even if he's not as fast or as skilled, if he's got most of the speed and the skill and he plays a harder game, because we're giving DeBrusk credit for playing harder than he did before, but that's somewhat damning him with faint praise there, because he really didn't play hard at all, the first, 5-6 years of his career here, whatever it was,
Well, he's learning the game. Learning the game.
He's started to play a little bit harder the last couple, but like, there are much harder players out there with, the same amount of skill, production, all that stuff that you could try to go out and get. I mean, I
will say one more thing in defense of Jake. Last year when he played with Bergeron and Marchand, more often than not, he was driving that line.
He was great. He was great with them. He was great with them. There's no question about it. Like, but it is also telling, though, Steve, like, when you take him away from that line, that he's not nearly the player he was on that line. That tells you that he was benefiting from the other two guys as well. I agree with you. But like, maybe
you get the best of them by playing them with good players.
Yeah, that's the catbird seat, is if you're playing with those two. The only one that couldn't handle that was Brett Conley when they brought him in from Tampa Bay like 7 or 8 years ago, whatever that was. All right, that leads me actually to the one of the last questions here. Who do you see as possible big game targets in the UFA with the 20+ million or 25 million if Linus Ullmark is traded this summer with the salary cap space that they have? There's a lot of names out there. There's some decent names in free agency. Certainly there may be trades and names out there that we haven't really seen develop yet. But like, one name that I think is interesting, he's a hard player. He's a skill player. He's put up a lot of goals this year. He plays for the team that just eliminated you in the playoffs. Sam Reinhart is the kind of guy I think you would look at and you would show a lot of money to if you're the Bruins, to bring him here. Because not only is he a faster, harder, just better player than what you have, you're also like the double whammy of weakening the Panthers if you make that move and if you pay him and bring him to Boston. Dupes, Sam Reinhart.
I love him. Yeah, I love him. I just think he's going to get a whole whack of money.
Yep.
I think he'll really want to stay where he is, so he'll take a little less to stay there. They've got a really good thing going there. So, but I mean, I like him because he's young enough, he's talented enough, he checks a lot of these boxes. I just don't know that for them to land him would be investing so much. I don't know if they're going to be able to do anything else. And we don't know where all those pieces go. We don't know what the final budget is. We know Sweeney likes to keep $2 or $3 million in his pocket, which I think is wise. He would be. I mean, the guy who's been in my mind, but I know it's got caveats all over it, is Stamkos.
Mm-hmm. That's another name
of culture and ability and skill and harder, faster, all of that. but when you get into that over 30 market, it can be a tough one.
Yeah, and he's not going to cost you nearly as much as Reinhardt would, obviously, and that's a short money. Maybe you get him if you offer him a few years, and Tampa's maybe only offering him one or something like that. When push comes to shove. But he's definitely on the list, the short list of interesting candidates the Bruins could bring in that would bring a lot, and would fit a need for them. Steve, your thoughts on just like the UFA market, good fits for the Bruins, who you think they should be targeting?
Reinhardt would be perfect because he can play wing or center.
Yep.
I like Gensel.
Yep.
Gensel, he's the guy who's shown up in the playoffs. He's played a fast game under Mike Sullivan. Really excelled in the playoffs. In those 2 cup runs by Pittsburgh. Goal scorer. He gives a good counterweight to Pasternak. He'd be the guy that I would target. But Reinhardt, like Kevin said, I don't know if Reinhardt would want to move away from what they've got built in Florida right now. And Stamkos, I don't know if he's ever going to leave Tampa. Yeah, it's just even he
does seem pretty annoyed that Tampa didn't take care of him during the year, though.
Yeah. I know, but hey, do you really want to sell your house and all that? For an extra $500,000,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. But I like that Reinhardt. I like Gensel.
Yeah, and to your point, like it speaks a lot and it speaks very well of Jake Gensel that Sidney Crosby was so pissed when he got traded from Pittsburgh to Carolina. You don't see him that irate publicly at the organization very often, and he was not happy. So that tells you all you need to know about him as a player, teammate, all of the above. So I think he's another one. Those are actually the 3 I looked at the most that could be very helpful to the Bruins or could be targets, were Stamkos, Gensel, and Reinhardt. And so, like, there are some good names in free agency with the money that they have that they'd be able to go after, in addition to, the trade market as well. The D market is not nearly, I think, as robust and strong. But there are some forwards out there if you want to spend for them. Should there be any changes to this Bruins coaching staff, Steve Conroy? You spoke to about Montgomery doing a good job, and I agree. I think he did a better job beginning to end this year than he did the year before because he had to do more coaching. This was, I think he was much more involved. There was more prodding and, motivating and making adjustments and a lot of stuff going on. And I think, he really maybe put his imprint as a coach even more on this year's team than he did last year. That being said, I do feel like the 7 too many men in the ice penalties in the playoffs was bad, egregious, like unacceptable, all of the above. Like that's a real problem. And, maybe part of it was so much of the, switching lines, switching pairings, switching line combos, switching players, then you've got assignments of players they're responsible for on the ice and a lot of the stuff that's going on the bench. Because it seemed like there was a lot of confusion on the Bruins bench at times during these games with the too many men in the ice stuff. And some of it was on the players for sure, brain cramps, just making mistakes. But something else had to have been going on to have that many.
Yeah, and you're right. I think that probably goes to how he likes to change lines, and that's been a positive for the Bruins because that's the way he's changed momentum in games, and it's usually worked.
Yep.
So I'm not saying you have to live with 7 too many men on the ice calls in 13 games. That's got to be rectified. There are a couple of other things that I didn't like in the playoffs. As I mentioned, shoehorning Forbett into the lineup when you've got Parker Wotherspoon there who had played pretty well.
Yep.
And another thing is going back to that top heavy first power play unit. It wasn't working at the end of the season. It didn't work in the playoffs.
Yep.
Having Marchand, Pasternak, and McAvoy together.
It was better when they split them up at the beginning of the Toronto series.
Yes,
it worked better.
Yeah. That all being said, you got to look at the big picture. 109 points on a team that lost a ton of talent. They they almost won the division. With some pretty good teams in the division. I don't think the Bruins should get into that cycle of a new coach every 2 years. I don't think they want to do that.
Yep.
And I don't think they need to do that. I think, Montgomery overall is a pretty good coach. He does like to tinker, and sometimes that gets the best of him, but I think he's a very good coach that, should be here.
I agree. And they play hard for him too. You can tell.
Yeah.
The message gets through. I think they enjoy playing for him. They enjoy the system that he has. There are definite quibbles and issues. But also winning that playoff round, I think was huge for him as much as it was for the players. Having some success advancing, getting that Game 7 win. I think this would have been a much more sort of legitimate and a much more difficult question to answer if they had lost in the first round to the Toronto Maple Leafs and not advanced to play the Panthers. Dupes, your thoughts just on the coaching staff, and if you think there needs to be any changes?
Yeah, there has to be. There has to be change here. And you've already hit on some of the bigger points. The too many men thing was atrocious.
Yep.
Not being prepared for 3 games coming out like that's in my mind inexcusable. We end up judging what they need by the playoffs. So we come out of the playoffs saying they got to play harder and faster. Well, when you've got voids like that, the too many men not being prepared, handing the bench to Marchand for the second period in Toronto. I've never seen that ever. A power play that was bad all year and then got worse. I'm not saying bad all year. We know what happened. They came out and they had a great stretch from October 5 up until Thanksgiving, and then it was a team that lost as many as it won for the rest of the year, right through the playoffs. So they've got to figure out, in concert, voices that get this team shot out of the cannon from the start. Don't make stupid mistakes one after the other on too many men, right? And overall, can they preach harder and faster? Ultimately, the harder and faster issue goes right back to Sweeney and Neely. They've got to come up with those players. But right now, do I have faith that this group, as presently constituted, can get them better prepared to play, fix the power play, get the math right on the bench? No, I don't. Because we just watched it. So if they're going to come back with the same reset there, and I'm not saying dump this guy down, they've got to figure that out.
Yeah,
that's got to be a real hard look right now, and that's why. I mean, I wrote a column a couple of days ago. It wouldn't have surprised me at all if they. And again, I come from watching Harry for all those years. He fired the coach every year.
right.
I'm not saying that's right, but what was damnable here was at least as bad as what they were looking for. We haven't even talked about getting grade A's, getting guys in those positions, preaching that game. This is a bigger set of facts against the current staff than was against Butch, and they got rid of Butch, right? So it wouldn't have surprised me. I don't know if that's the right move, but there was enough damnable here that didn't get done.
Well, it's going to be interesting, right? Because I believe, from what I was told, Montgomery was a 3-year contract. I don't, and this is the 3rd year coming up, right? So it'll be interesting if there's an extension, if what happens. I don't know that it's going to be a change this offseason with him, but it's going to be an interesting year going forward to see what happens, just based on some of the things that you're talking about, Dupes. And the too many men on the ice thing is inexcusable. That needed to be adjusted. That needed to be addressed and fixed at some point in the playoffs. For it to continue all the way to the end, you basically averaged a too many men on the ice penalty every other game. Right. In the playoffs. All the other teams that they broke the record of had all gone to the Stanley Cup Finals and played 4 rounds of hockey in the playoffs. That's just embarrassing. And you can't just fluff it off on the players and say it was all their fault. It's definitely part. The coaches deserve plenty of responsibility, and that wasn't the only gripe. As you guys mentioned, there were other complaints as well. That being said, I think you go into next year certainly with Jim Montgomery as the head coach and give him another year with, the improvements you're going to make this offseason with free agency and bringing some other impactful players in. I just wonder if maybe like some changes are made to the, the assistant coaches or the staff that he has after some of the issues that they had in the playoffs with that moving forward. That's going to be interesting to watch. It'll be interesting to see what they say tomorrow as well. Dupes, Steve, thank you very much for joining us. Let's thank our sponsors. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time. This is the app where you can get NBA playoff tickets. The Celtics are still going strong. Pick out any specific games or matchups that you love to attend. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets in the playoffs with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account at Game Time and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Steve, Dupes, thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right,
See
guys.
you later.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.